Today I'm going to walk you through a project that took my fireplace surround from this to this. Hi, my name's Doug. I just finished a project that turned out fantastic and I want to share it with you today. So let's go check it out. Back in 2020 when we bought the house, the fireplace had no surround and was open on both sides into the master bedroom. So I framed it out and put up some of that heavy rolled cardboard for sound deadening, and then put up some drywall. I didn't want to just paint it the same color as the living room, so I settled in on wood slat acoustical panels. In order to get ready for this project, I removed the acoustical panel on one side and started laying out the shelving. And so what I wanted to do is put up some floating shelves in front of the acoustical panel because I think it'll look just really cool. And we should be good and level. Perfect. So this is the look that I'm going for with the floating shelves. They're going to be in front of the acoustical panel. So how I'm doing this is I took the panel down. I'm going to identify the right placement for the brackets, put the brackets up, and then custom cut each bracket hole in the panel so I can reinstall the panel over the floating shelf brackets and then the floating shelves in front of the acoustical panel. I found some cutting boards that were solid pieces that were cut out with live edge. And so I'm going to modify these. As you can see here, I've taken one side of it off because I needed a flat edge to mount against the wall. So I've already pre-cut several of these boards. And now I have to work out a jig and drilling capacity. I think I'm going to use my drill press, but we'll see how that goes. And that's to fit these shelving brackets that I purchased online specifically for floating shelves. So after looking at the brackets and how they go on the wall and the strength, see how those lines are as wide as my 2x4 and the screw holes are wider than that. So I'm going to have to go in back and put bracing in between my studs just to be able to pick up a solid backing to screw my brackets to. And I'll show you what that looks like, because this wasn't an original build, this is an addition that's being modified. So here you see on the back side of the wall, I've got the sheetrock removed already. Apologize for the lighting in here, but see, I put one brace in already. I didn't know how many I would need to do, but it looks like I'm just going to have to go in and cut out that insulation and put bracing in at all of those intervals that the shelves will be resting on. That's the right way to do it. And here's how that bracing turned out. We've got the boards marked. I don't know if you can see that, for where the drilling's going to do into the sides. So I got to square all that up and get that laid out. But all the shelves are marked, and we have all the pegs up on the wall, securely attached to those support boards we put on the back side. Now that all the brackets are in place for our floating shelf system, all the boards have been cut with a clean edge. Let's go downstairs and figure out how we're going to drill the holes so they fit under the brackets. Now that we have our boards ready, we're going to use our square to mark the center line for a board that's 1.5 inches. That would be 3/4 of an inch. And then we're going to mark our cross line for where the bracket peg inserts, and that's exactly where we need to drill our hole. Now this happens with every project, and the part that I really enjoy the most about doing this kind of work is having to figure out how to do things. So I've got my floating shelf, and as you can see, one side is contoured, which makes it impossible to stand it up to get a straight cut. And what's really important is that the peg for the floating shelf slides in at 90 degrees. And in order to make that happen, I ended up building this jig, which is set at 90 degrees, has some support structure to it, and this clamps right down to the drill press. And on that surface area, I'm then able to clamp these boards down so they are at 90 degrees. So my drill press can come in and drill in straight. That was it. So you'll notice about here, I'm not sure how well it shows up on the camera, but the sawdust stops about that depth. And the deepest throw for this drill press is about 3 inches. And we need to go the full 6 for this drill bit. So we're going to have to use this as a pilot process for all of the holes for the shelving boards. And then we're going to go back and clamp it down horizontally and finish out the holes with a hand drill. Now, because my drill press only had a 3-inch run to it, I've got to finish the rest of the hole out for my shelving brackets with this hand drill. Okay, that was our last hole. Now that that's done, let's go see about custom fitting that acoustical panel. After drilling all the bracket holes into the shelves, I went ahead and did a dry fit just to be sure everything was lined up properly before moving on to cut the holes into the acoustical panels. Now, something I really like about these floating shelf brackets or pegs is that when you mount them to the wall, the screws at the top actually pull down pretty tight. And what that does is it installs the peg with this very slight incline going out to the edge. The drop from this point to this point is almost 1/4 of an inch. Now, given the weight of our shelves, that's really good because these guys are going to flex a little bit from the weight of the shelves as well as the weight of anything we put on top of them, give it an extra stability. So this is exactly why I had to put the additional bracing in on the other side to make sure that these guys were good and secure. And here's that bracing I talked about on the back side of the wall. Now at this point, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to effectively mark each cut on the bracket protrusions on the acoustical panels, but here's what I came up with. So what I have here is a piece of drywall left over from putting this guy together, and I'm going to take the edge of this, the cut edge, and I'm going to use it to mark the pegs. Just need to make sure that we're flush against the top, flush against the wall. Slowly go back until where we're just pushing on those pegs. And now with a closer look, we can see that we actually hit here, here, and down here. Due to the location of some of our holes, I was quite concerned with using a rotational cutting tool like a plunge router or the drill that we use to make our holes for the brackets on the floating shelves. Also, some of our holes, maybe through the felt in between the boards, some are going to be partial cuts into the wood, some are going to protrude fully through the wood. Doing that, and especially the fibrous nature of this felt board that's backing the acoustical panel, it gives us all kinds of opportunities for things to get tangled up and possibly injured. So I've decided the best route to go is to use an oscillating cutting tool, such as this one. Now this blade's a little large, so in a pinch, without having to scour the internet to find a reasonable solution, we're going to go ahead and modify this blade so we can just do a plunge oscillating cut and make square holes for our round pegs to go through. So as we see here, I've modified my oscillating cutting tool to be the right dimension to make some square holes for our floating shelf pegs, which you can see I've done. After all the acoustical panels were custom cut to the shelving bracket dimensions, reinstallation was a snap. I was so excited to put the shelves under the brackets over the panels for the first time. I mean, how great does that look? After initially arranging some of the stuff on the new shelves, I thought the project was a wrap. However, the next day I decided to add some accent lighting, so I laid out everything needed to install a couple of low-profile LED downlights to each side of the fireplace surround and trim it out to tie it all together and have a nice finished look. Now let's lay out our template for cutting the holes for our lights. Easy way to find center. So corner to corner. This is how the dark walnut turned out. Now we're going to put a coat of poly on everything. And while that dries, we'll go on upstairs and do the electrical. What the hell? This is not fitting over here either. This is perfect. Perfect fit, measurements and everything. Like I said, I think somebody snuck into my shop and changed my settings. That's the story I'm sticking with. We've corrected our mistake, paying attention to the board. So now we've got both of the top panels and the downlights installed, the wiring's all connected, and let's see what it looks like. Fantastic, look at that. I like it. Now we just have to put the piece of trim up across the top. So the other day, when I was working on my floating shelves, I wasn't quite satisfied with how it came out. Although it looked great, I just wanted to embellish a little more. So I added a couple of boxes at the top of those little nooks and installed some LED lighting that I can control with my phone. Pretty cool. I ran the wiring to both sides down here to a switch, and that's it. Now I've included links to some of the items in this build in the video description. And if you like this content or have any questions about how I pulled all of this together, please leave me something in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.